Welcome to the fourth in our series of films about the future of Britain's forests. In the last two films, we've discussed woodlands and forests from the perspective of active management, what it is, why it's important, and what it might entail for the future. Today, we're going to adopt a different perspective. With the help of Suzi Martineu, who works for the Tree Sisters Network and coordinates the annual tree conference, we will be considering the relationship between people and trees. The future of our woodlands rests to a great extent in the value that we humans attach to it. Economic value, environmental value, and ecological value, and that intangible value that we all feel when we walk amongst trees. And it is this value that I want to explore today. Welcome, Suzi, and thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself and your work with the Tree Conference and the Tree Sisters.
Hello. So I'm the founder of the Tree Conference, which we set up about 4 years ago. And that is a forum for all sorts of different people who are interested in trees to come together and share cutting edge science and extraordinary practices. And I'm also Educational Alliances for Tree Sisters, who are a women's-led reforestation charity focusing on reforestation projects in the tropics.
We're currently in lockdown, hence why we're doing this online rather than out in a nice woodland somewhere.
Yeah.
How do you feel that people's connection to and appreciation of nature has changed during this time?
I think it's wonderful that within the guidance from the government, there's been this focus on this hour's exercise. And I think a lot of people who maybe don't always do that have taken that up. So I think it's really massively strengthened and deepened both people's relationships with the natural world, with the green spaces around them, with the places that they can access for walking and woodland, and also their understanding of how it's helping their mental health and how it's helping them to have a good day when they've done that.
And can you tell us what you know about the relationship between humans and trees, and how the positive feelings that we seem to experience in woodlands when we're walking amongst them and forest has a basis in science?
One of the big influences who we invited to the first tree conference was Diana Beresford-Kroeger, who's a botanist and a biochemist. So there's a lot of different areas of research that she covers, and examples would be a variety of different aerosols emitted from different trees that both contribute towards reduction of inflammation in the lungs or the chemicals that actually reduce tension in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also lots of different examples from different tree species, and I think it's a vastly understudied area, even though what they've been doing in Japan with forest bathing has taken this area of research on in such a large way. But there's also the gathering of things when you're out in the woods. So the elderberry having antiviral properties, the hawthorn supporting the berries, supporting the opening of the left aorta. And so there's this kind of combination of the gathering of the food and the ways that we can be working with the actual products of the woodlands, but also this extraordinary quality in the air. So we know about trees sequestering carbon and cleansing the air around roads and in cities, but it's much more extensive than that and much more varied onto different living systems. And I'm particularly touched at the moment also by David Haskell with his 11 ways of smelling a tree. And the description of different trees and plants having evolved to suit and meet the senses of the beings who will come in and help propagate their seeds.
And do you think that different types of woodland elicit a different response in people?
They all have so much to offer. So, you can go into a stand of Scots pine and it's got an extraordinary presence all of its own. And it is maybe those large-scale plantations, maybe a tad lonelier as a feeling sometimes to the experience you may have on an ancient oak forest in Dartmoor. with mosses and multiple examples of biodiversity flitting across your path.
What factors do you think actually influence these responses that we have?
Well, I think a lot of it relates to beauty and what we connect to. But I also think that it does seem to make a huge difference, the level of biodiversity. So if it is that you're seeing different plants and animals, if you've got different levels of understory planting, different species of trees, as well as that creating habitats for different species of birds and wildlife and insects and fungi, then obviously that's very compelling and for somebody to participate in as a woodland experience.
So here's the tricky question then. Is it possible to attach economic value to these benefits? Or in other words, how can we make this economically interesting to landowners?
Well, it's an extraordinary question because it's got such a culture change implicit when you think about it. So, yes, there are all sorts of different ways that people have attached economic benefit with regards to recreation, access for local communities, different kinds of crops that aren't ones that we've naturally looked at so much before. And also, I think the economic benefits on the whole come from reducing expenditure in other budget areas. So if you're looking at the UK as a whole, the impact on mental health and well-being, impact on cancer rates, overall health and fitness of having access to green spaces reduces the budget expenditure both for the NHS and also associated care provision. So and that is mirrored also in the taking care of water and water purity and rivers and soil structure, flood prevention, and particularly a personal passion, which would be sewage treatment and reed bed systems. So there are so many ways that we can be reducing expenditure in other areas that that it's not necessarily fair for the landowner themselves to take the full have to find the full amount of money required to take care of things. I think that's something that the government needs to balance out and recognise that the support to the land owners and farmers to be bringing those benefits to the wider community is something that needs to be more financially remunerative than simply on the carbon sequestration, which some of the modern grants are looking at. And I can see the benefit of that because it's attached to markets. And at the same time, there are many other countries that prioritise these added values and support landowners on that basis.
Do you believe this experience that we're all going through together now will lead to a greater appreciation of trees and a desire to protect existing trees and invest in the expansion of new woodlands and forests?
I absolutely hope so. It's been my experience from speaking to individuals that is very much the case. And it's a no-brainer, I think, for the government in terms of, and for the wider citizen-led response to the climate crisis, for us to take those decisions. And we've discovered that we can work at a really large scale nationally really well together. So I think if we were putting our time and attention into supporting the landscapes now, that would be a really beautiful response to come out of COVID.
What are your hopes and fears for the future of Britain's forests?
Well, I suppose I'll start with fears, because my fears are that people don't take the amazing opportunities that lie before us. There's a continuation of a lack of integration across different government departments and across different sectors of understanding a kind of a clear, coherent relationship with ecosystems and trees that needs to be, I think, central to how we move forward. So my concern would be we don't take up the opportunities that are just low-hanging fruit for us right now. For my hopes, I've got extraordinary hopes for the UK. I think it's got such a beautiful, people have such a wonderful relationship with trees here. I would be delighted to see us vastly increase our canopy cover, and in line with the Woodland Trust 19% across the UK by 2050. I think that's achievable. And I think that the citizen-led approach, where each of us are taking responsibility for learning and understanding what we can do in our own landscapes, is incredibly exciting. The community groups and local and sort of county level projects are doing really amazing work. And I also think that the integration in education, and really completely throughout education, throughout secondary, university, and into the professions, for them to all really have a much better understanding of botany and of the extraordinary gifts that lie within working with living systems, and particularly at this time, the extraordinary developments in working with mycorrhizal networks and fungi, as profiled by Merlin Sheldrake and others. It would also be really nice for us to be having all of our own timber production and not needing to be drivers of deforestation in other countries because we were well stocked at home.
If you could choose one, what policy would you like to see the UK government introduce in relation to trees?
I think the 19% canopy cover across the UK by 2050 is an achievable target. And I think we would do that best if we all took responsibility for that increased canopy cover. So if the government was to put out clear messaging of all landowners, farmers and communities increasing canopy cover between 5 and 10% and supporting that directly financially, then that would bring about the kind of canopy cover that we need in this country.
Thank you so much, Suzi. The arrival of this global pandemic has, amongst other things, drawn government's attention away from its goals for wood creation this year, which is disappointing but understandable. One of the silver linings of this lockdown that we're all experiencing is that those of us lucky enough to live near green spaces and trees have reconnected with them. And we will undoubtedly come out of this valuing them more. The pressure will be there to protect the spaces that we have, and I think to plant more trees. It is clearly hard to calculate the economic value of health and well-being, but we know from research in urban areas that it is very real. Suzi talked about the cultural change that will allow us to quantify the value. We have to look at savings across other sectors, such as the NHS, to fully appreciate the health benefits that woodlands provide. Because these less tangible benefits are hard to value in economic terms, it is unrealistic to expect individual landowners to shoulder the risk while others receive the reward. And we hope that government will treat health and well-being benefits on a par with carbon sequestration, with water quality and biodiversity, and reward landowners for creating spaces where we can go and commune with the amazing trees in our woodlands. Thank you for watching.